We heard you finally got a place. We're here to move in and make peace. That's what my son, Ethan, and his wife, Savannah, said the moment I opened the door. 6 months ago, they shoved me out of my own home like I was nothing. Now they stood there smiling, pretending they had hearts. But the second they stepped inside my little apartment in Kansas City, both of them froze. Not because it was luxurious. It wasn't. They froze because on my entry table sat a framed photo of my late husband, Harold, and a man Ethan had spent years calling Uncle Ray. Only that man was not Uncle Ray, and Ethan knew it the second he saw the picture. His face strained so fast, I thought he might faint. I'm Gloria, 67 years old, and I used to believe blood meant loyalty. I used to believe family meant protection. Then Harold died, and the masks came off. Harold and I were married for 44 years. I was the kind of wife people called good. The kind of wife who held everything together with a smile and a prayer. I cooked, I cleaned, I stretched grocery money like it was rubber. I worked extra shifts when Ethan needed tuition help. I welcomed Savannah with open arms, even when my gut told me to be careful. When Harold passed from a stroke, the house went quiet in a way I can't explain. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Every room felt like it was holding its breath without him. At first, Ethan and Savannah visited. They hugged me. They brought store-bought flowers. They said the right things. "We've got you, Mom," Ethan told me one evening. "You won't be alone." Savannah even held my hand and called me Mama G. I wanted to believe her. But grief doesn't change people. It reveals them. The visits slowly stopped. The calls got shorter. If I texted, Savannah would reply hours later with one-word answers. Ethan stopped picking up. When he did answer, he sounded annoyed, like I was interrupting his real life. Then came the day my life split in two. It was a Friday, rainy and cold. Savannah showed up in a crisp blazer, hair perfect, lips shiny. Ethan followed behind her with a folder. No hug. No, "How are you doing, Mom?" Nothing. "Mom, we need to talk," Ethan said, like we were strangers. Savannah rubbed her belly like she wanted attention. "I'm pregnant," she announced, "and we need stability." My throat tightened. "You're pregnant? Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan's eyes didn't soften. We didn't want stress. Then he slid papers on my coffee table. "This house is too big for one person," he said. "We're moving in." I stared at him, hearing Harold's voice in my head, hearing my own heartbeat. "What are you saying?" I whispered. Savannah's smile was small and sharp. "It means you need to move out. 1 week." 1 week. I felt my legs go weak. "This is my home," I said. "This is where your father lived. This is where we built our life." Ethan finally said the words that crushed me. "Legally, it's my house too." I remembered then. Years ago, Harold added Ethan's name to the deed to avoid problems later. We thought we were being wise. We had no idea we were handing our son the knife. Tears came hot and fast. "Ethan, don't do this," I begged. "I'm your mother." Savannah sighed, like I was embarrassing her. "Stop it," she snapped. "You've always been a burden." A burden. Then she leaned in and hissed the cruelest thing I've ever heard. Harold knew it too. He just didn't have the guts to tell you. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to defend his father, waiting for him to defend me. He didn't. He only said, "Please don't make this hard." That night, after they left, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried until my chest hurt. Not just because I was losing my home, because I realized something worse. The son I raised was willing to erase me, and the woman he married was enjoying it. I thought being thrown out would be the worst pain of my life. I was wrong. The real pain came when I realized how easy it was for them to forget me. They didn't help me pack. They didn't ask where I was going. They didn't even pretend to care. I spent that week walking through the house alone, touching walls, opening drawers, reliving 44 years in silence. There was the kitchen table where Harold drank his coffee every morning, the armchair where he used to pull me close during old reruns, the hallway mirror where I watched my hair turn gray while raising a family. I packed everything I owned into 6 cardboard boxes. 6 boxes. That's what a lifetime of marriage amounted to.
Old photographs, a chipped gravy boat from my mother, cookbooks filled with my handwritten notes, dresses I no longer wore but couldn't throw away. On the morning I left, no one came to say goodbye. I placed my house keys on the counter. I left a note that simply said, "Be happy." Then I called a taxi. The only place I could afford was a run-down motel on the edge of town, the kind of place people avoid unless they have no choice. The room smelled like mildew. The walls were stained. The mattress creaked every time I shifted. The bathroom was shared with strangers who slammed doors at all hours. That was my new home. The first few nights, I barely slept. I stared at the cracked ceiling and replayed every mistake I'd ever made as a mother. Where did I go wrong? When did Ethan become this man? I tried calling him. Voicemail. I texted Savannah asking about the pregnancy. Hours later, one cold message came through. Stop contacting us. That was it. I stopped eating properly. I bought the cheapest food I could find. Stale bread, canned soup, discount fruit already bruised. Some days I ate once. Some days not at all.
After a month, my clothes hung loose. My face looked hollow. No one noticed. I walked neighborhood after neighborhood looking for work. Cleaning, caregiving, anything. Most people smiled politely and shook their heads. "You're too old. We need someone younger. This job might be too demanding for you." Too old. At night, the motel was loud. Arguments, music, sirens. I cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear me. One night, someone banged on the wall and yelled, "Stop crying, old woman!" That's when humiliation settled deep into my bones. One afternoon, while walking past a shopping center, I saw Savannah. She came out of a baby store carrying expensive bags. Her belly was round now. She looked radiant. She climbed into a shiny silver car I'd never seen before. Something inside me snapped. I called her name and hurried toward her. She turned, saw me in my worn dress and scuffed shoes, and frowned. "What do you want?" she asked, looking around nervously. "I just wanted to ask how you're doing," I said. "How's the baby?" Her eyes hardened. "My child is fine," she said, "and they'll stay fine as long as you stay away from us." Then she shut the door and drove off. I stood there on the sidewalk while strangers walked past me like I didn't exist. That night, sitting on the edge of my motel bed, I made a decision. I would stop begging. I would stop chasing people who had already decided I was disposable. If they wanted me gone, then I would disappear from their lives completely. I didn't know then that fate had already placed something in my hands, something buried deep in my past, something that would change everything. And I was about to find it by accident. I found it on a night when sleep refused to come. The motel was loud again, someone arguing 2 rooms down, a television blaring through thin walls. I needed something to distract my mind. I started sorting through the last box I hadn't unpacked, the one I kept pushing aside because it hurt too much. At the bottom, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was a bundle of envelopes tied with twine. My heart skipped. They were letters, old ones, written in Harold's handwriting. My hands trembled as I untied the string. I knew immediately these weren't ordinary letters. The first envelope was marked with my name, Gloria. Inside, Harold's familiar slanted writing filled the page. "My love, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to protect you the way I always tried to. There are things I never told you because I wanted you to live peacefully, not worrying about what might never come true." My breath caught. Before we met, I worked in real estate. I bought land when no one wanted it, outskirts, empty areas, places people laughed at. I had never known this. I kept those properties quiet. I didn't want money to change who we were, but I always wanted you safe. I pressed the paper to my chest. "The documents are in a safe deposit box at Riverstone Bank. number 317. The key is taped behind our wedding photo. I gasped. I still had that photo. I had carried it with me from the house. I rushed to my bag, pulled it out, and flipped the frame over. My fingers found the tape immediately. Behind it, a small brass key. I sank onto the bed, shaking. There were more letters. Harold had detailed everything. Plot numbers, addresses, maps, even photos of empty land taken decades ago. He had bought 9 parcels. 9! Places that were now surrounded by shopping centers, apartments, and offices. One letter ended with words that broke me completely. You are stronger than you believe, Gloria. If anyone ever hurts you, remember you are not powerless. I cried until morning. The next day, I went to the bank. My hands were sweaty as I handed the teller the key. She checked my ID and nodded. This box hasn't been opened in over 2 years, she said softly. They led me into a small room and opened it. Inside were folders, deeds, appraisals, and an envelope marked, "For my warrior." Inside was an updated valuation. Total estimated worth $1.9 million. I sat there stunned. I had been sleeping in a moldy motel, starving, crying myself to sleep, while a fortune waited quietly for me. That day changed me, not because of the money, but because I understood something important. I had never been helpless. I had just been kept in the dark. I hired a lawyer under a company name no one could trace back to me. I sold only a portion of the land, enough to breathe again. I moved out of the motel quietly, no announcements, no explanations. I got my hair done, bought a few clean, simple outfits, nothing flashy. I started observing. Ethan and Savannah didn't know what was coming. They didn't know the woman they discarded had learned how to stand on her own. And when I finally bought my apartment, I chose it carefully, not to show off, not for revenge, but because I wanted a front row seat to watch the truth unfold. Because betrayal has a way of circling back, and soon they would come knocking. The phone rang 3 times before I picked it up. I already knew who it was. "Mom?" Ethan's voice sounded thin, unsure. "We heard you bought an apartment. We just want to talk, make peace." Make peace. That phrase almost made me laugh. After months of silence, hunger, and humiliation, now they wanted peace? I told them the address. I told them the floor. I told them the time. When the knock came that afternoon, my heart was steady. That surprised me. I opened the door, and they stepped inside. Savannah froze first. Her eyes moved slowly from the clean floors to the tall windows to the quiet confidence of the space. This wasn't luxury, but it wasn't desperation either. Ethan swallowed hard. "You live here?" he asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "I do." They sat when I gestured, but they perched on the edge of the couch like guests who didn't belong. Savannah spoke first. "We thought maybe we could stay for a while. You know, help each other." Help each other. I poured water into 2 glasses and took my time. Power is often quiet. "Before we talk about anything," I said, sitting across from them, "I need to understand something." They looked at me. "Why did you wait 6 months to call me?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. Savannah shifted uncomfortably. "We were overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed," I repeated, but not overwhelmed enough to check if I was sleeping indoors, not overwhelmed enough to ask if I was eating. Silence. I leaned back. "When you threw me out, you didn't think I mattered. You thought I had nothing." Ethan's voice cracked. "Mom, we didn't know—" "You didn't care to know," I corrected gently. Savannah wiped her eyes. "We made mistakes." "No, I said quietly. You made choices. I stood and walked to the window. You treated me based on what you thought I was worth, a widowed mother with no leverage. Ethan whispered, Then how did you get all this? I turned slowly. That question tells me everything. You're not curious because you're proud of me. You're curious because you're calculating. Savannah broke down then. We're losing the house, she sobbed. Ethan lost his job. I'm 8 months pregnant. We don't know what to do. I nodded once. So now you understand fear. Good. That's where learning begins. Ethan looked at me with red eyes. Are you going to help us? I paused. Then I asked the question that mattered most. Why should I? They stared at me. Because you're my mother, Ethan said weakly. I shook my head. You lost the right to use that card when you put my belongings in boxes and gave me a deadline. Savannah whispered, Then what are we to you? I held her gaze. You are people who betrayed me and now need something from me. Nothing more, nothing less. The room felt heavy. I took a breath. I will consider helping, I said slowly, but not because we're family. They leaned forward. I will help because I choose to, and if I do, it will be on my terms. What terms? Ethan asked. I smiled for the first time that day. Not warmly, not cruelly, clearly. That, I said, is what we'll talk about next time. They left without asking to stay, and when the door closed behind them, I didn't feel victory. I felt balance. For the first time since Harold died, I wasn't pleading to be loved. I was deciding what I would allow. They came back 2 days later. This time they didn't knock like they owned the place. They waited. When I opened the door, Ethan stood with his shoulders slumped. Savannah looked smaller somehow, one hand resting on her belly, like she needed reminding she was still carrying something precious. I didn't invite them in right away. Before you step inside, I said, you need to understand something. They nodded quickly. This is no longer a family visit, I continued. This is a conversation about accountability. They agreed without arguing. Inside, the air felt different, heavier, more honest. I sat down first. That mattered. Ethan spoke before Savannah could. Mom, we're behind on the mortgage. 3 months. The bank sent a notice. I held his gaze. I know. He blinked. You know? I know a lot of things, I said calmly, including that the house you pushed me out of is days away from foreclosure. Savannah's breath caught. She grabbed the edge of the chair. I also know, I continued, that you've been fighting at night, that you sold the car, that you're drowning in fear. Ethan looked like a child again. How do you know all this? I didn't answer that. What matters, I said, is that you finally understand what it feels like to have no safety net. Savannah started crying. Real crying this time, not the dramatic kind. I was cruel to you, she said through sobs. I said things I can't take back. I nodded once. Yes, you were. Ethan swallowed hard. We were wrong. About everything. Silence stretched. Then I spoke. If I help you, I said slowly, it won't be because you're desperate. It will be because you've learned something. What do you want? Ethan asked quietly. I stood and walked toward the window. Tomorrow, I said, you will visit every neighbor who saw you throw me out. You will tell the truth. No excuses, no blaming stress or pregnancy. Savannah's eyes widened. Everyone? Everyone, I repeated. You humiliated me publicly. You will repair that publicly. Ethan nodded. We'll do it. I turned back to them. Second, I continued, you will write me a handwritten letter, each of you, explaining what you did, why it was wrong, and how you plan to change. Savannah wiped her face. Okay. Third, I said, you will stop calling this making peace. This is not peace. This is rebuilding from rubble. They listened closely now. And finally, I added, you will accept that things will never go back to the way they were. Ethan's voice shook. Does that mean you won't forgive us? I paused. It means forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. They left quietly after that. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors called, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Gloria, one said, your son came by. He told us everything. He was ashamed. Another said, Savannah cried on my porch. She admitted she treated you terribly. By evening, the truth had made its way around the entire block. When they returned that night, they looked exhausted. They handed me the letters with trembling hands. I read them slowly. Ethan wrote about entitlement, about mistaking obedience for weakness, about confusing inheritance with love. Savannah wrote about fear, about insecurity, about how easy it was to be cruel when she thought she held power. When I finished, I set the letters down. You've taken the first step, I said, but understand this. They leaned forward. I didn't survive being discarded to rescue you from consequences, I said. I survived to learn my worth. Ethan nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll help, I said finally, but not as your safety net. Savannah whispered, Then what? I met her gaze. As your boundary. They sat very still after I said that. A boundary. Not a mother rushing in to fix their mess, not a grandmother begging for scraps of affection. A boundary. Ethan finally spoke. What does that mean, exactly? It means, I said calmly, that if I step in, it will be structured, documented, and conditional. No emotions, no guilt. Savannah nodded quickly. We understand. I reached for a folder I had already prepared and placed it on the table between us. Ethan's eyes widened. You already planned this? I planned my survival, I corrected. What happens to you is a consequence of your choices. I opened the folder. The mortgage arrears can be resolved. The foreclosure can be stopped. Savannah gasped and clutched her belly. But, I continued, holding up one finger, the house will no longer be yours in spirit or control. Ethan stiffened. What do you mean? It will be placed in a trust for your child, not for you. You will live there as caretakers, not owners. Savannah's eyes filled again, but this time with relief instead of entitlement. You will not sell it. You will not borrow against it. You will not threaten anyone with it, I said. That house already destroyed one relationship. It won't destroy another. Ethan nodded slowly. That's fair. Second, I said, you will rebuild your independence. I slid another paper forward. A job offer, I said, starting modestly, no shortcuts, no favors beyond the introduction. Ethan stared at it like it might disappear. I'll take it, he said immediately. Good, I replied, because if you're late once or behave like the man who threw his mother out, I'll pull every connection I used to help you. He swallowed hard. I won't waste it. I turned to Savannah. You will focus on your health and the baby. No stress games, no manipulation, and no using a child as leverage. She nodded through tears. I swear. Silence settled between us again. Then Savannah asked the question I didn't expect. Will you ever trust us again? I leaned back and thought carefully before answering. Trust doesn't come from words. It comes from patterns. Right now, you don't have any good ones. That answer hurt them, but it was honest. I closed the folder. One more thing, I said. It isn't a secret arrangement. We don't pretend nothing happened. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? It means, I said, that when people ask where I went or why I left my home, the truth is told. Savannah winced. No rewriting history, no blaming grief or stress. You own what you did. They nodded. When they stood to leave, Savannah paused at the door. I know I don't deserve to say this, she said softly, but I hope one day you can see me as more than the woman who hurt you. I looked at her for a long moment. That depends on who you choose to become, I replied. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment and exhaled. Helping them didn't feel like weakness. It felt like control with compassion. For the first time, I wasn't acting out of fear of abandonment. I was acting out of clarity. And clarity changes everything. But I still hadn't decided how close I would allow them back into my life. Because some betrayals don't end when the crisis passes. They echo. And the final test was still ahead. The baby arrived 3 weeks later. I got the call at dawn. Savannah's voice was shaking, nothing like the sharp woman who once called me a burden. She's here, she whispered. We're at the hospital. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone. Life has a strange way of circling back. I'll come, I said finally, but understand this clearly. Yes? She asked quickly. I'm coming as a grandmother, I said. Not as a rescuer, not as a shield. I understand, she said. And for the first time, I believed her. At the hospital, everything smelled like antiseptic and quiet panic. Ethan looked smaller than I remembered, pacing the hallway with his head down. When he saw me, he stopped. Mom, he said softly. I nodded. No hugs yet. Some wounds still needed air. When they placed that baby girl in my arms, something inside me shifted. Not softened, aligned. She was warm, tiny, completely unaware of the mess she'd been born into. I won't punish you for your parents' sins, I whispered to her. I promise. Savannah watched me closely, tears slipping down her cheeks. I never knew strength could look like this, she said quietly. I didn't respond. Some lessons don't need answers. Over the next weeks, I watched carefully. Ethan showed up to work early, every day, no excuses. Savannah stopped posturing and started listening. She asked questions instead of making demands. They didn't ask me for money. They didn't push for closeness. They respected the distance. That mattered more than apologies. One evening, Ethan came to my apartment alone. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, standing near the door, for not destroying us when you could have. I met his eyes. I didn't do this for gratitude. I did it so you'd understand consequences without losing your soul. He nodded slowly. I used to think power was control. Now I know it's restraint. That was the first time I felt something close to hope. A month later, Savannah invited me over for dinner. I hesitated. Then I agreed. The house looked the same, but the energy didn't. They'd turned my old sewing room into a nursery. Not flashy, simple, respectful. Savannah hovered nervously as I walked through. We kept it neutral, she said. Didn't want to assume anything. That, too, mattered. At dinner, no one raised their voice. No one rushed to speak over me. They waited. When Savannah cleared the table, she stopped and turned to me. I know forgiveness isn't something I can ask for, she said, but I want you to know I'm trying to become someone worthy of your presence. I studied her face. Keep trying, I said. Consistency is louder than regret. That night, as I drove home, I realized something. I didn't get my old family back, but maybe, just maybe, I was watching the birth of a better one, And for the first time since betrayal shattered my world, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long while. Cautious peace. One last conversation remained, one final line to draw, and after that, the story would be complete. The last conversation happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. No tension, no raised voices, just honesty sitting between us like an open book. We were at my apartment. The baby slept in a carrier by the window, the soft rise and fall of her chest steady and calm. Ethan sat across from me, Savannah beside him, hands folded. "I need to say this out loud," I began. "Not to punish you, but to close a chapter." They nodded. "When you forced me out," I said slowly, "you didn't just take a house. You took my sense of safety, my dignity, my belief that I mattered to you." Ethan's eyes filled. "I know," he whispered. "For months, I was hungry, I was scared, I was invisible," I continued, "and neither of you checked on me." Savannah pressed her lips together, trembling. "I survived that alone," I said, "and because I survived it, I am no longer the woman who will tolerate disrespect in the name of family." They listened without interrupting. "This is the boundary," I said. "We move forward, but we don't pretend. If you cross it again, I won't argue, I won't explain, I will walk away." Ethan nodded firmly. "We understand." Savannah looked at me with raw sincerity. "We won't forget this lesson, ever." I looked at the sleeping baby. "This child will know me," I said, "but she will also know that love and respect go together. One without the other is not love." Silence followed. Then Ethan spoke. "Mom, I'm proud of you." The words surprised me more than they should have. "Thank you," I said simply. When they left that evening, I stood alone by the window watching the sun sink low over the city. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. I had learned that boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks. And forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing peace without surrendering your self-worth. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have walked away forever? Or allowed a second chance with firm boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might help someone else who feels alone after betrayal. If stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mabel Stories. Your support helps keep these voices heard. Until next time, remember this: you are never too old to reclaim your power.